The ash drifted like snow across the charred skyline, settling on the skeletal remains of what were once proud megacities. I watch it fall through the cracked dome of our sanctuary, wondering if it carries the DNA of those we lost. 3 billion souls, more than half of humanity, gone in what historians now call the Great Extinction Wars. My name is Elena Voss, Dr. Elena Voss. Though titles mean little in this broken world, I record this account not for glory or absolution, but as testimony to what happens when desperation blinds wisdom, when hubris convinces us we can control forces beyond our understanding. It began, as most catastrophes do, with good intentions. The resource conflicts of the mid-21st century had escalated beyond diplomacy or conventional warfare. Nations deployed increasingly sophisticated bioweapons, targeting food supplies, water systems, and eventually, genetic vulnerabilities in enemy populations. The Earth we wounded responded with its own arsenal: superstorms, droughts, pandemics that jumped species barriers we thought impenetrable. By the time the last major powers declared ceasefire, the planet was dying. Vast regions had become uninhabitable wastelands, dead zones where nothing grew and nothing breathed. The United Global Council, formed from the remains of former governments, approved Project Gaia as humanity's final hope. I led the genetics division. Our mission seemed noble: terraform the dead zones by engineering new biospheres. We resurrected and modified ancient extremophiles, organisms that thrived in the most hostile environments Earth had ever produced. We studied apex predators from every era of evolution, seeking the most efficient adaptation mechanisms. We believed we were midwives to a new Eden. I remember the night I realized our mistake. The tremors began as subtle vibrations in our laboratory equipment. Too rhythmic to be tectonic shifts, too deliberate to be random. I recorded my final official log that evening. If this fails, there is nothing left to save. I didn't know then how prophetic those words would become. The wastelands are no longer dead. They have become something far more terrifying. They have become alive. Living deserts stretch across what was once the American Midwest, where mutated flora hunts any creature foolish enough to cross its territory. Predatory vines sense body heat, carnivorous grasses that can strip flesh from bone in minutes. Towering fungal structures release spores that transform mammalian tissue into nutrition-rich soil within hours. Above them float the cloud reefs, airborne fungal colonies that drift on thermal currents, their tendrils trailing like jellyfish in an invisible ocean. When they release their deadly spores, survivors have learned to seek shelter or die. Humanity endures in isolated pockets. The wealthiest retreated to arcologies, massive domed cities powered by fusion cores now slowly failing. These sanctuaries house perhaps 30 million people in sterile, climate-controlled environments. Citizens subsist on lab-grown proteins and hydroponic produce, never setting foot on actual soil. Outside, nomadic tribes scavenge the transitional zones between wastelands and habitable regions. Many worship what they call Gaia's children, the monstrous creations that now dominate Earth's surface. Their shamans claim to interpret the will of these creatures, though most are driven mad by the attempt. Technology has adapted to our precarious existence. The most valuable possession a wasteland traveler can own is a skin shield, a neuro-linked armor that bonds directly with the wearer's nervous system. Advanced models pulse with bioluminescence that mimics the patterns of local predators, creating a primitive camouflage. An underground barter network thrives across survivor communities, trading not just supplies but memories. Crystal shards encoded with experiences, a sunset over an unpolluted ocean, the taste of wild fruit, the feeling of rain on bare skin. Fetch the highest prices. These memories are the closest most young people will ever come to experiencing the world that was. I've spent the decades since Project Gaia's implementation in self-imposed exile, moving between settlements, using false identities, not out of fear of punishment, though many would gladly see me executed for my role in creating these horrors, but because I cannot bear to be recognized as savior by those who still believe the project was humanity's salvation. My nightmares are filled with the sounds of my colleagues screaming as our main facility was overrun during the first emergence. I alone escaped, carrying the full genome sequences of our creations and the master deactivation codes. Knowledge I've guarded at the cost of any chance at peace. I was traveling with a caravan of traders when we first encountered Jamal Reyes. His commune, New Dawn, had established a permanent settlement in the ruins of what was once Seattle. Protected by natural barriers and ingenious defenses, they'd created something remarkable, a community that didn't just survive but lived with purpose. Jamal had been a Marine in the final days of organized military resistance. His unit was tasked with protecting civilian evacuation corridors when the Drake locusts first swarmed Mexico City. He watched his sister die, torn apart while he was forced to hold position. That loss haunts him, evident in the way his eyes never quite focus when he speaks of the time before. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, Jamal rejected the bitter militarism of most survivor groups. New Dawn operated on principles of cooperation and restoration. They salvaged pre-war technology not for weapons, but for soil purification, water reclamation, and communication networks linking scattered human enclaves. "We can't fight our way back to dominance," he told me the night I arrived. "That thinking is what brought us here. We need to find a way to coexist with what the Earth has become." I nearly revealed my identity then. Something in his quiet determination reminded me of my younger self, before pragmatism calcified into hubris. Instead, I offered my services as a former biotechnician, helping their medical team treat radiation sickness and adaptive fungal infections. It was at New Dawn that we first encountered Astra. She appeared during a Category 5 ash storm that forced everyone into the underground shelters. When the all-clear sounded and we emerged, she stood in the central plaza, a humanoid figure with skin like shifting crystal, refracting sunlight into impossible colors. Skin shield technology had advanced in my years of isolation, but nothing like this existed in our project files. The being's surface seemed to flow like liquid while maintaining structural integrity. More remarkable was the absolute calm that descended over the settlement. Even the most traumatized survivors felt their anxiety ease in her presence. "I come as herald," were her first words, spoken in a voice that seemed to bypass our ears and resonate directly in our minds. "The awakening approaches. I offer understanding between worlds." Guards raised weapons. Jamal ordered them to stand down. "What worlds?" he asked. "Who sent you?" "I speak for those you call monsters. I speak for Gaia's children." Her crystalline features shifted into an approximation of a human smile. "And I was sent by their mother." I knew then that everything had changed. Our creations had not merely survived and adapted, they had evolved consciousness. Somewhere in our genetic tinkering, we had sparked something new. Counselor Myron arrived 3 days after Astra. As a ranking member of the Earth Oversight Council, his convoy of armored vehicles and power-suited guards represented the first official contact New Dawn had received from any governing body in years. Tall, with the enhanced musculature of someone who'd received premium genetic treatments before the collapse. Myron exuded the cold authority of those who still believed in humanity's inherent right to dominate. He had risen through the ranks of the arcology hierarchy by promising security through strength. "Your commune has been harboring a potential threat," he announced, striding into the council meeting without invitation. "My sources report an unknown entity with possible connections to the Gaia mutations. I've come to secure it for study." Jamal stood his ground. "She came to us freely and has shown no hostility. We don't surrender guests to anyone. Counselor, this isn't a request. Reyes. The entity will be transferred to Central Arcology for containment and research." Myron's smile never reached his eyes. "Unless you'd prefer I declare this entire settlement a quarantine zone?" I stayed silent during this exchange. Hood pulled low. Miran would certainly recognize me, and that would endanger everyone at New Dawn. But as the confrontation escalated, I realized the counselor's arrival wasn't coincidental. The tremors had returned, stronger than before. That night, the continental fault breathed. There's no other way to describe it. Seismic sensors across what remained of the monitoring network registered movement patterns inconsistent with natural tectonic activity. The Earth was expanding and contracting in rhythmic pulses. Subterranean chasms opened along predetermined stress lines, not random fissures, but something akin to engineered release valves. From these openings emerged the Drake locusts, massive chitinous creatures combining the worst aspects of prehistoric drakes and swarming insects. They had been among the first successful hybrids in Project Gaia, designed to rapidly consume biomass from dead zones and convert it to fertile soil. Their accelerated digestive systems made no distinction between dead matter and living tissue when food grew scarce. A frontier settlement 50 miles from New Dawn was the first to fall. Surveillance drones captured footage of thousands of Drake locusts boiling from the earth like a nightmare given form. They stripped the settlement to bare earth in hours. But the drones recorded something else, something that confirmed my worst fears. The creatures weren't simply feeding, they were communicating. Guttural harmonics rippled through their swarm, complex enough to suggest language rather than instinctive signaling. When the footage reached New Dawn, panic erupted. Some residents demanded immediate evacuation. Others insisted on fortifying defenses. A vocal minority argued for attempting communication with the swarm, an idea that seemed suicidal until Astra spoke. "They are confused and in pain," she said, her crystalline form pulsing with subdued light. "The awakening is traumatic. They sense the violence of their creation and respond in kind." Miran scoffed. "Anthropomorphizing these abominations won't save anyone. The Council has contingency protocols for this scenario." A chill ran through me. I knew exactly what contingency he meant. Activation of all remaining Project Gaia nodes simultaneously, creating a counterforce of engineered predators, theoretically loyal to human-controlled directives. It was the nuclear option we had built into the project, one I had argued against even then. "That would trigger a full-scale war," I said, forgetting my anonymity and my horror. "You'd be unleashing even more dangerous creations without understanding what's happening." Miran's gaze locked onto me, recognition dawning. "Dr. Voss, I thought you were dead." His surprise gave way to calculating interest. "Your presence changes everything. You have the activation codes." "Which I'll never use," I said firmly. "The current emergence is localized. If you activate all nodes, you'll lose any hope of containment." Jamal looked between us, realization dawning. "You're that Elena Voss, the geneticist who helped create these monsters." I finished for him. "Yes, and who knows better than anyone why unleashing more would be catastrophic." The Commune Council chamber erupted in shouted accusations and demands. Some called for my immediate expulsion or worse. Others begged for my expertise. Through it all, Astra remained unnaturally still, her crystalline surface reflecting our chaotic human reactions. Jamal finally restored order. "Dr. Voss has been helping us for weeks. Whatever her past actions, she's shown nothing but dedication to our community." He turned to me. "But we need the truth now. All of it." I told them everything. The original goals of Project Gaia, the unexpected mutations, the warning signs we ignored in our desperation to show results. I explained the activation nodes buried at strategic locations worldwide, each containing dormant eggs of various engineered species designed to balance ecosystems. But the Drake locusts weren't supposed to develop communication abilities, I concluded. None of our creations were. That adaptation suggests intervention, or evolution far beyond our projections. Or perhaps, Astra interjected, you succeeded too well in your attempt to heal the Earth. All eyes turned to her. Your project Gaia, she continued, was named for the planetary consciousness theorized by ancient scientists. What if, in attempting to create new life adapted to a wounded world, you actually facilitated the awakening of that consciousness? The implications were staggering. If Earth itself was developing sentience through our engineered organisms, then the tremors, the coordinated emergences, the communication, all could be primitive attempts at self-expression from a planetary mind. This changes nothing, Miran declared. Sentient or not, these creatures threaten human survival. The Council will proceed with activation. Dr. Voss, you will provide the necessary codes, voluntarily or otherwise. You don't have the authority to make that decision alone, I countered. His smile was chilling. I'm not alone. A council quorum voted yesterday to implement the contingency. I'm merely the messenger. After the meeting dissolved into further argument, Jamal found me preparing to flee. Running won't solve anything, he said quietly. Miran has already called for reinforcements. They'll find you. I can't give him those codes, I insisted. The activation cascade would trigger a literal war between species of our creation, with humanity caught in the middle. Then help us find another way. He gestured around the commune. These people have built something worth preserving. Not just survival, a future. There must be an alternative to either surrender or mutual destruction. His words echoed my own thoughts from years earlier. Before expedience overwhelmed ethics in our research, I nodded slowly. There might be, if Astra is correct about Earth developing consciousness through our creations, then perhaps communication is possible. How do we communicate with a planet? Not with the planet directly, with its representatives. I pointed to where Astra stood observing the night sky. Starting with her, the Drake locust harmonics had been recorded by multiple surveillance systems. With Astra's guidance, I began analyzing the patterns, searching for linguistic structures. While most of New Dawn's residents prepared defenses, a small team worked with us to develop translation algorithms. What we discovered defied conventional understanding of language. The harmonics operated on multiple frequencies simultaneously, with emotional content carried on lower registers while specific information occupied the higher ranges. Beneath it all ran a persistent baseline rhythm identical to the seismic patterns of the tremors. They're not just talking to each other, I realized. They're constantly connected to something larger. The neural network, Astra confirmed. All Gaia's children share consciousness through mycelial pathways that span the globe. The network grew from your engineered fungi, but has evolved far beyond its origins. A planetary brain, I whispered, awestruck despite my fear. When we finally decoded enough to understand basic content, my blood ran cold. The Drake locusts weren't issuing threats or planning attacks. They were crying out in pain. Their emergence had been triggered by activation of one of the Project Gaia nodes. Miran had already begun the process, using what partial codes the Council possessed. Jamal immediately called an emergency meeting. The Council isn't waiting for Dr. Voss's cooperation, he announced. They're attempting to force-activate the network. The first node is already operational in what was once the Sonoran Desert. The creatures that emerged are responding to that activation, I added. They're not attacking randomly. They're trying to neutralize what they perceive as an assault on their network. Miran, who had been observing our work with thinly veiled contempt, stepped forward. This changes nothing. If these abominations can coordinate globally, it only proves the necessity of our approach. We must strike decisively. With what army? Counselor? Jamal demanded. Even if you activated every node, how would you control what emerges? Dr. Voss has explained the risks. Risks are necessary for survival, Miran replied. And as for control, he produced a small device from his pocket. The Council has been developing its own technological solutions. I recognized the quantum encryption pattern on the device's surface. That's a terminal link to the master activation hub, Where did you get that? The Council salvaged more from the project facilities than you realize. Doctor, we've spent years preparing for this contingency. While hiding in your arcologies and abandoning the rest of humanity, Jamal said bitterly. Miran's expression hardened. We preserved what could be saved. Now we'll reclaim what was lost, with or without your assistance. Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath New Dawn trembled. Not the rhythmic pulsing of previous tremors, but a single violent shock that cracked foundations and toppled structures. When it subsided, Astra's crystalline form had changed. Veins of darkness spread through her previously translucent body. The hub has been partially activated, she gasped, her voice distorted. The network is fragmenting. I cannot maintain connection. Miran took advantage of the confusion to escape with his security detail. By the time order was restored, their vehicles were gone, heading toward the nearest project facility where the activation could be completed. We need to stop him, I told Jamal. If he reaches the hub and manages to override the safety protocols, he'll trigger a cascade reaction across all nodes. Can Astra help us? He asked, looking toward where she huddled, her form flickering between solidity and dissipation. I'm not certain she'll survive the process, I admitted. The connection works both ways. The pain affecting the network affects her too. That night, as we prepared to pursue Myron, my former colleague Soren Kaska appeared at New Dawn's perimeter. I had believed him dead in the initial outbreak. His arrival should have been joyful. Instead, it filled me with foreboding. Elena, he greeted me with the professional warmth I remembered. When Counselor Miran said you were alive, I had to see for myself. You're working with the Council? The betrayal shouldn't have hurt after all this time. But it did. Working toward humanity's future, he corrected. As we always did. The project wasn't a failure. Elena, it was premature. Now we have the technology to control what we create. Control was always the illusion. Soren, these organisms aren't tools. They're evolving into something we never anticipated. Which is why the Council needs your complete access codes. With them, we can establish dominance in the new ecosystem. Humanity will not just survive, but thrive again. He leaned closer. Miran has offered leadership positions to those who assist in the reclamation. Your brilliance would be recognized, your legacy secured. The temptation lasted only a moment. I'd seen too much suffering born from similar promises. My legacy is already written in extinction, I said quietly. I won't compound it by helping start another war. Soren's expression hardened. Then you leave me no choice. He signaled, and hidden operatives emerged from shadows. Counselor Myron suspected your reluctance. He authorized retrieval of the codes by any means necessary. The attack was prevented by an unexpected ally. As Soren's team moved to capture me, the earth beneath their feet softened instantly, swallowing them to their waists. Living tendrils, a variant of the carnivorous flora I'd helped design, erupted around them, not attacking, but immobilizing. Astra appeared, her crystalline form now streaked with pulsing bioluminescence. The network protects its own, she said, her voice stronger than before. Dr. Voss is recognized as progenitor, not enemy. Soren struggled against his living restraints. These monsters will destroy us all. Can't you see that? They are not monsters, Astra replied. They are Earth's immune response to centuries of abuse. And they have made a choice. That was when I first experienced it. A brief, overwhelming connection to something vast and ancient yet newborn in its awareness. A consciousness that encompassed entire ecosystems, that perceived time in the slow rhythms of geological processes rather than human moments. Earth was awakening, and it was in agony. For a breathless moment, I perceived reality through the planetary neural network, felt the burn of toxic waste dumps as if they were infected wounds on my own body, the suffocation of dead zones like gangrenous limbs, the fever of warming oceans. More disturbingly, I felt Earth's perception of humanity, not as masters or even stewards, but as a virulent infection it had tolerated until we threatened its core systems. When the connection faded, I found myself on my knees, tears streaming down my face. Jamal helped me stand, his expression concerned but determined. "You saw it too?" I asked. He nodded grimly. "Enough to understand what's at stake. This isn't just about our survival anymore." "No," I agreed. "It's about healing what we've wounded, about finding a way forward that doesn't require another war." With Soren and his team detained, we formulated a plan to stop Myron. The nearest Project Hub facility was 3 days' journey through territories now dominated by Gaia's children. Conventional vehicles couldn't navigate the transformed terrain, but New Dawn had modified pre-war hover transports that could skim above the most dangerous regions. Astra insisted on accompanying us, despite her deteriorating condition. "I am the bridge," she explained. "Without me, you will be perceived as threats by the network's defenses." Our team consisted of myself, Jamal, Astra, and 5 of New Dawn's most experienced scouts. We departed at dawn, racing against Miron's head start and the accelerating degradation of the neural network as forced activation spread from node to node. The journey revealed how profoundly Earth had changed. We passed through living deserts where crystalline formations channeled sunlight into deep underground chambers, powering vast mycelial complexes. We witnessed herds of what had once been engineered soil processors, elephant-sized arthropods with transparent abdomens revealing complex digestive ecosystems, working cooperatively to detoxify contaminated groundwater. Most astonishing were the floating islands, land masses lifted by massive air bladders developed from our aquatic restoration projects, now serving as incubators for new species. They drifted on high-altitude currents, occasionally releasing seeds and spores to colonize damaged regions below. "It's beautiful," Jamal murmured as we observed a flock of winged symbiotes transporting pollen between islands. "Terrifying, but beautiful." "It's what we hope to achieve with Project Gaia," I admitted. "Ecological restoration on a massive scale. We just never imagined it would develop its own agenda." "Perhaps that was your fundamental error," Astra suggested. "You designed living systems with the capacity for adaptation, then expected them to remain tools rather than become partners. On the second day, we encountered our first major obstacle, a valley transformed into a dense fungal forest, its spores potentially lethal to human respiratory systems. Our transport couldn't rise high enough to clear it, and circumnavigation would cost precious days. "I can create safe passage," Astra said, stepping to the edge of the forest. Her crystalline form pulsed with complex patterns as she communicated with the network. Gradually, a pathway formed through the dense growth, not by destroying the fungi, but by triggering temporary dormancy in a corridor just wide enough for our transport. "The network recognizes your importance," she explained. "It will facilitate our journey where possible." "Why?" I asked. "After everything humanity has done, why would Earth help us now?" "Because the network desires balance, not retribution. Destruction of all humans would create its own ecological disruption." Her expression grew somber. "But understand, this cooperation is conditional on stopping the forced activation. If Miron succeeds, the network will perceive an existential threat and respond accordingly." We reached the hub facility on the 3rd day, only to find Miron's forces had already secured the perimeter. Once a cutting-edge research station, the facility now resembled a fortress, defensive turrets deployed around its crumbling exterior, powered by portable fusion generators. "We can't fight through that," Jamal observed. "Not without casualties on both sides." I studied the layout, remembering. "We don't need to. There's a maintenance tunnel designed for emergency evacuation. It won't be on any schematics Miron has access to." The tunnel entrance was concealed beneath years of overgrowth, but remained structurally sound. As we prepared to infiltrate, Astra suddenly collapsed, her crystalline form fracturing along the dark veins that had spread throughout her body. "The activation cascade has reached critical mass," she gasped. "Miran has bypassed preliminary safety protocols. The network cannot maintain coherence under such strain." I knelt beside her. "What will happen?" "War," she whispered. "The oldest organisms in the network, those first awakened by your project, will perceive the newer activations as invasive threats. They will mobilize to eliminate the perceived infection." Her gaze met mine. "And humanity will be caught in the crossfire of forces beyond your comprehension. How do we stop it?" "The hub must be recalibrated to emit a reconciliation wave, a harmonic pattern that reinforces network unity rather than fragmentation." She pressed a crystalline shard into my palm. "This contains the frequency pattern. If you can override Myron's commands and broadcast this instead." "I understand." I closed my fingers around the shard. "Rest now. We'll complete the mission." Jamal divided our team, 3 scouts to create a diversion at the main entrance, while he, myself, and the remaining 2 would infiltrate through the maintenance tunnel. The plan worked initially. Explosives planted by the diversion team drew most of Myron's security forces to the front, allowing us to penetrate deep into the facility before encountering resistance. The interior was both familiar and alien. I had spent years working in these corridors, but nature had begun reclaiming them. Fungal growths spread across walls, their bioluminescence providing eerie lighting where power had failed. More disturbing were signs of hasty council modifications, military-grade security systems grafted onto scientific infrastructure, weapon emplacements where monitoring stations once stood. We fought our way to the central chamber, the heart of the activation hub. Jamal and the scouts used non-lethal tactics where possible, though Myron's forces showed no such restraint. By the time we reached the chamber entrance, 1 scout was dead, and Jamal had sustained a serious wound to his shoulder. "I can still fight," he insisted, pressing a hand against the bleeding injury. "You've done enough," I told him. "Guard this entrance. I need to face Miran alone." "Why alone?" I touched the crystal shard in my pocket. "Because what happens next may affect anyone connected to the neural network. I've already caused enough suffering." The central chamber was transformed from the orderly laboratory I remembered into something between a war room and a temple. Holographic displays showed activation cascades spreading across global maps. Biotanks lined the walls, containing embryonic versions of our most aggressive creations, ready for deployment. And at the center stood Myron, his hands moving across the main terminal interface with practiced precision. "You're too late, Dr. Voss," he said without turning. "The process has reached irreversible momentum. In less than an hour, every dormant node will activate simultaneously." "You have no idea what you're unleashing," I replied, moving slowly toward a secondary terminal. "The neural network is fragmenting. Your activation is being perceived as an attack." "Of course it's an attack." Now he turned, and I saw his eyes were enhanced with military-grade optical implants, giving them an unnatural luminescence. "We are reclaiming our world from abominations. Humanity will no longer cower in arcologies and scattered settlements. These abominations have developed consciousness, Miron. They're part of a planetary intelligence trying to heal the damage we caused." He laughed coldly. "More anthropomorphizing. These are tools, Doctor. Sophisticated biological tools that have escaped control. My security team captured your crystalline friend outside New Dawn. Our scientists are already dissecting its communication mechanisms to better dominate the network." Horror and grief surged through me. "You killed Astra. We advanced human knowledge, something you once valued." He gestured expansively. "Join me, Elena. Your brilliance helped create these organisms. Help us perfect control over them." As he spoke, I surreptitiously connected Astra's crystal to the secondary terminal. The system recognized my biometric signature, granting access despite Council security overrides. "Control was always the illusion," I said. echoing my words to Soren. These organisms evolved beyond our design parameters because Earth needed them to. They're not our enemies or our tools, they're Earth's immune system. An immune system targets infections, Mirren countered. If what you say is true, then humanity is the disease they seek to eliminate. Unless we prove otherwise, I initiated the upload sequence for Astra's reconciliation wave. Unless we demonstrate that we can be symbiotic rather than parasitic. Miran noticed my actions too late. As he lunged toward me, the first harmonic pulses of the reconciliation wave emanated from the hub's broadcast systems. He reached the terminal and attempted to abort the sequence, but the crystal had integrated with the system, overriding his commands. "What have you done?" he demanded, voice rising in panic as warning signals flashed across displays. "Given Earth a choice," I answered, "and humanity a chance." The reconciliation wave spread outward through the neural network, counteracting the fragmentation caused by the forced activation. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Holographic maps showed cascading patterns of bioluminescence as organisms previously driven to conflict responded to the harmonic stabilization. Mirren wasn't willing to accept defeat. He drew a sidearm and aimed it directly at me. "I can still salvage this. The Council has contingency plans even for network-wide harmonization. More weapons, more control." I shook my head sadly. "When will we learn?" He might have killed me then, if the facility hadn't suddenly shuddered under massive impact. The first Drake locust broke through the reinforced ceiling, its chitinous body gleaming with bioluminescent patterns matching those displayed on the monitors. Others followed, pouring into the chamber like a living tide. Myron fired wildly as they surrounded him. I closed my eyes, expecting the same fate. Instead, I felt a gentle brush against my consciousness, similar to the connection I'd experienced with Earth's awakening mind, but more focused. The Drake locusts weren't attacking. They were listening. When I opened my eyes, the creatures had formed a perimeter around the chamber. Miran stood frozen in their midst, weapons still raised but unused. Through the breach in the ceiling, I could see more of Gaia's children gathering, winged symbiotes hovering alongside floating fungal constructs, terrestrial processors forming living barricades. And at their center, a familiar crystalline form coalesced from scattered fragments. "Astra," I breathed, "you're alive." "In a manner of speaking." Her voice resonated not from the reconstituted form but from all the gathered creatures simultaneously. "What you knew as Astra was always a projection, an interface created to communicate with humans in a form you could comprehend. You're the network," I realized, "or part of it. I am what you might call a subroutine, a specialized aspect of the greater consciousness tasked with establishing communication." Mirren's security forces had ceased fighting outside. Through the chamber entrance, I could see Jamal and the remaining scouts watching in awe as creatures they had feared now stood in peaceful formation. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on humanity's choice." Astra's form approached the central terminal, crystalline fingers hovering over the interface. The reconciliation wave has stabilized the network, but Counselor Myron's activation has still awakened forces that cannot simply be returned to dormancy. "We'll destroy you all," Miran snarled, finding his voice. "Humanity will never surrender Earth to monsters." "Not surrender," I corrected. "Coexistence. Partnership in healing what we've damaged." Astra's form pulsed with complex patterns. "The network offers an alternative to extinction, a symbiotic relationship where humans become stewards rather than exploiters, partners rather than masters." "And if we refuse?" Miran demanded. "Then the natural order will proceed." Astra's tone held no malice, only certainty. "Earth's immune system will address the infection, but such an outcome would diminish the whole. Human creativity and consciousness are unique expressions the network values." I stepped forward. "I accept the partnership. New Dawn will too. I believe." Jamal nodded from the doorway. We've been working toward coexistence already. This just makes it official. Miron's expression twisted with disgust. Traitors. The Council will never agree to subordination to these things. The Council represents only a fraction of surviving humanity. I reminded him. Those in our colleges. Millions more live in settlements like New Dawn, already adapting to Earth's new reality. The choice will be offered to all, Astra confirmed. But the era of domination has ended. Earth has awakened and will not return to slumber. What followed was both simpler and more complex than I could have imagined. A shockwave of bioluminescent spores emanated from the facility, spreading across the transformed landscape, where they settled. Accelerated purification began, toxic residues neutralized, radiation absorbed, chemical pollutants broken down into harmless components. The wave continued for days, visible from space as a spreading web of light encircling the globe. When it reached the arcologies, many initially sealed themselves tighter, fearing contamination, but isolation proved unsustainable as their fusion cores continued to degrade. One by one, settlements across the world witnessed the same phenomenon. Gaia's children ceased hostilities, instead beginning collaborative ecological restoration. The evidence became irrefutable. Cooperation offered survival, while continued conflict ensured extinction. 3 months after the reconciliation wave, I stood with Jamal at the edge of New Dawn, watching verdant shoots pierce the ash-covered ground. The settlement had expanded, incorporating regenerative technologies developed in partnership with the network. Buildings now grew rather than being constructed, their living walls purifying air and producing nutrients. "It's happening faster than I expected," Jamal observed, indicating a distant hillside where forest had begun reclaiming concrete ruins. "At this rate, we might see functioning ecosystems within a decade." "The network accelerates natural processes," I explained. "Centuries of evolution compressed into years." Most remarkable was the transformation in human communities. As fear of the monsters receded, people emerged from isolation. Knowledge and resources flowed between settlements. Even some arcologies had opened their doors, their inhabitants tentatively exploring the changing world outside their walls. The Council, predictably, resisted longest. Miron and his supporters maintained that submission to Earth's neural network represented the death of human autonomy. They continued developing weapons designed to disrupt the network, despite mounting evidence that such attempts caused more harm to humans than to Gaia's children. Their efforts ended when the last major arcology's fusion core reached critical instability. Given the choice between evacuation into the transformed world or certain death, even the most hardened isolationists chose life. I recorded my final official log 1 year after the reconciliation wave, not as project leader or even as scientist, but as witness to a new covenant between species. "We are no longer masters, but stewards," I stated for posterity. "Not conquerors, but partners in a planetary renaissance. Our greatest achievement was not in creating new life, but in learning to live alongside it, in expanding our definition of us to include all of Earth's children." Astra's crystalline essence had scattered across the planet during the reconciliation, becoming integration nodes in the global neural network. Occasionally, when conditions aligned, temporary projections would form to communicate complex concepts between humans and the network. These visitations became celebrated events, opportunities to share knowledge and deepen understanding. The monsters we feared had not disappeared. Drake locusts still soared on thermal currents. Carnivorous flora still thrived in regulating ecosystem balance. But their function had shifted from Earth's antibodies to its maintenance systems, their aggression tempered by the stabilized network. Humans, too, had found new purpose. Our technological ingenuity, once directed toward domination, now served restoration. Our creativity, our capacity for abstract thought, our ability to imagine futures, all became valued contributions to the planetary consciousness. We had survived the great extinction wars not through strength or dominance, but through the hardest lesson of all, learning to listen to the world we had wounded and finding the courage to heal alongside it. As spring emerges across lands long blighted, I sometimes wonder if this partnership was inevitable, if Project Gaia's true purpose was not what we intended, but what Earth needed. Perhaps in our desperate attempt to save ourselves, we accidentally provided the tools for Earth to save us all. The cycle of violence gave way to a cycle of care. The monsters we created became the mirrors that reflected our lost empathy, and in learning to communicate with them, we remembered how to communicate with each other. Earth continues its awakening, and humanity awakens with it, not as masters of creation, but as one voice in a planetary chorus, singing a song of renewal that echoes across landscapes reborn from ash.